Yeah, we're getting ready to get Joshua Schiffer in here now. He's a practicing attorney, a defense attorney, and a plaintiff side attorney, a legal expert who has been watching this trial right alongside of us and giving us some legal analysis and context as we all work to understand all the developments inside of the courtroom. Joshua joining us now. Thank you as always for your time. I want to start with this. I know you've been following along closely today. To start at a kind of broad strokes level, is it fair to say that the state, in their remarks early today, is doing all it can to narrow the jury's focus down to one man, Colin Gray, and defense attorney Jimmy Berry did his best to expand the scope of blame or responsibility, culpability, whatever you might want to call it, to a whole host of people who were in the life of Colt Gray?
Thanks for having me on, Zach. And you're absolutely right. That's what the state and the defense have been trying to do, kind of existentially or from a meta perspective during this entire trial. From the very beginning, the state opened this case with a focus not on the crimes or alleged crimes of Colt Gray, knowing that this jury's going to have that unanswered question of, well, has he actually been convicted? What's going to happen to the person who is the subject of all this litigation, of all this prosecution? But no, the state asked the jury to pay attention to specifically the actions of Colin Gray, and that somewhat feeds into exactly what the defense is asking. Pay attention to the actions of Colin Gray, what happened, and then, as you just aptly noted, Jimmy Berry and the rest of the defense is diluting and expanding that class of people whose actions are of interest to this jury. We heard very well presented by Jimmy Berry, one of Georgia's finest lawyers, how no one else got prosecuted. No one else was held to this very high standard of taking a proactive act to prevent something actively when they all had similar amounts of information. There's not a manual or a specific red line that if this happens, now you know something terrible is going to happen. No. The state is asking to prosecute Colin Gray in many ways for failing to predict the bad thing his kid was gonna do. And it's that gonna do, that prediction, that reasonableness when you cross these invisible lines. That's the big question for this jury.
Joshua, let me read a little bit of Jimmy Berry's remarks here that I think get at what you just told us here. He said during part of his closing, he said that the state has to prove that Colin knew Colt would, not could or might. The state has to prove that Colin knew Colt would. Jimmy Berry goes on to say that language is in the indictment. The state has to prove that, and in Berry's telling, the state did not. Joshua, first off, is that an accurate representation of the language in the indictment? And two, does that reflect the legal standard that the jury is going to have to ultimately determine whether the state met or not?
That language is one of the few things that actually does go back with the jury. Here in Georgia, it depends on the court what materials actually go back into the jury room, but always the indictment, which is filled with some sometimes confusing language, really specific language, is something that the jury almost holds on to like an emergency blanket, like a safety blanket, because it's got to match the words. And jurors have these two overriding fears: wrongful convictions, wrongful acquittal. When there's a word to hang their hat on, even if it's going to result in something that they don't like or they don't want, or they're going to struggle explaining to their friends and relatives for the rest of their life, if those words are there and they can create some connection with, man, that's why I had to vote the way that I had to vote. And they're going to go back and check that language. Jimmy Berry has done this for a long time. He knows that by highlighting that, everybody put in their notebook, oh, go check that language, make sure the defense is quoting it right, because turnaround's fair play. If the defense is calling attention to specific words and phrases that aren't there or aren't being interpreted in the way that Jimmy Berry wants, that's going to hold against the defense very harshly.
And Joshua, on the state side, Patricia Brooks said, this is a quote from her remarks, and Grace King and her report highlighted, I want to highlight it again. She said, quote, that Colin had, quote, sufficient warning. His son was a bomb waiting to go off, and he gave him the detonator. Is that the tone and tenor that you expect the state to have again in their final closing coming up in a few minutes?
Well, so you get that kind of double bite at the apple with the state under the way that Georgia has started doing closings here during my career. It used to be that the defense got final word, but no, since the state has the burden, they get opening and closing, and that's what we're going to see. The state came out with Madam Prosecutor in a kind of clinical, a very antiseptic way of she literally read the argument. And we will see, I believe, a lot more emotional pull during this second part of the argument that's incoming and will be the very last words that the jury hears before getting charged by the court and going back for deliberation. So I expect some more emotional heat, turn up that temperature, talk about the really horrific images, the actions that are beyond comprehension, hoping that that emotional tenure brings the state over the top with holding someone responsible for, as the defense said, the crime that a kid committed, not the dad. And that's the big fundamental question. Are we as Americans, and Jimmy can't argue this straight to the jury, he danced around it. He's making them ask the question, are we a nation that's going to convict people of a crime for what somebody else did? And he scattered in, without making really direct arguments, all the fears that a lot of people have. And they've worked on this back in their office by talking about the idea of just innocent gun owners, which make up the majority, I'm going to argue, of Georgians. I certainly imagine in this community, the vast majority of homes have a firearm. What's going to happen to those people? And can the state now run you up a pole and prosecute you? Fear, 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 fear. Because that fear of the government's very real in the general public, and it's something that defense attorneys are making a lot more hay out of, especially with the polarization that we've got right now and the extreme fear on both ends of the political spectrum we're experiencing. Fear motivates jurors more than anything, and you saw the state lean into that with, if we don't do something, you're all under threat, and the defense doing the same with, if you convict, every lawful gun owner is now going to be suspect for new potential crimes. And that battle of fears, that may be what the eventual real quandary is.